All right, I believe we are recording. Well, welcome everyone. I know this is a little bit of a different experience for all of us to have a public outreach meeting virtually, and please be patient with us. We have done some practice with all of this, but there might be a few glitches along the way. So first of all, just want to thank everyone for joining us today. I know that everyone has very busy lives, and with the current pandemic, many of us in the wastewater business have been extra busy. So thanks for taking the time to spend it with here today. So I'm Jennifer Epp. I'm the Central Coast Water Board Program Manager for the Waste Discharge Requirements Unit. And so that's all of our wastewater facilities in the Central Coast region that discharge to land. I'm going to start by introducing the project team that has been working on this project, and the project is the general permit for discharges from domestic wastewater systems with flows greater than 100,000 gallons per day. And as we've discussed with you all before, there's about 44 facilities in the Central Coast region that currently have individual permits, and the majority of those permits we plan on enrolling in a new general permit that we're going to go into the details about. So I'm going to start by introducing, having Howard introduce himself.
Hello, my name is Howard Cole. I work for Jennifer in the WDR unit.
Howard, you're on mute.
Hello, my name is Howard Kolb. I work in the WDR unit. Jennifer is my supervisor. I helped craft the draft permit that we're going to discuss today.
Great. And Kelsey, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Kelsey Gerhart. I am a staff water resource control engineer here at the Central Coast Water Board, and I work in both the WDR program and the site cleanup program, and I also have helped draft this permit.
Great, thanks, Kelsey. And we do have a couple of other water board staff on, so I think it would be great to have them introduce themselves as well. So, Christina, would you like to start? Oh, let me. I need to unmute you. Hold on. In fact, hold on. I'm just going to change the settings so people can actually unmute themselves otherwise. And it says that it's being recorded. Okay. Well, welcome back, everyone. Sorry for the technical delays. Let me just check. And we do have 28 participants currently, so I believe everyone who was on before has returned. So that's great. And in fact, we picked up a few more because we had 20. So excellent. Okay. So we had just introduced myself and Howard. So myself, Jennifer Epp, we had introduced Howard Kolb. We introduced Kelsey Gerhart, who is the project team for this project. And then we were going around and introducing the remainder of the Central Coast Water Board staff. And we were starting with Christina when we got cut off there.
Good morning, Christina Olmos. I work for Jennifer in the wastewater permitting unit, and I oversee facilities in Monterey County.
Great, thank you, Christina. Cecile. And you're gonna need to unmute yourself first, I think.
All right, can you hear me?
Perfect.
Oh, okay, great. I work in the waste discharge requirements unit, and I oversee permits in San Benito, Santa Clara, Southern Santa Clara, and Santa Cruz County.
Great. And it looks like we have Allison as well. Allison, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
My other computer broke, so I don't have any video. I'm a engineering student and assistant in the waste discharge requirements, so I just do a little bit of everything.
Great. And let's see, I'm looking at my list to see who else is here. Joey is here as well from the Central Coast Water Board.
Good morning. My name is Joey. I'm also a student assistant in the engineering for waste discharge requirements. I'm a current Cal Poly student starting my master's program at Cal Poly in environmental engineering.
Great. And I see James here. James, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is James Bishop. I'm an engineering geologist in the wastewater permitting program, and I don't have a particular county I'm assigned to. I kind of oversee a lot of the groundwater related projects in the region.
Great, thanks, James. And I see John Rocky is here.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm the engineer responsible for WDRs in San Luis Obispo County.
Great, thanks, John. And I see Tim. Tim Din?
Hi, everyone. My name's Tim. I'm also a student assistant for the Waste Discharge Requirements program, so I help out staff with the projects in each of their counties.
Great. And any other water board staff that are on that I have missed? Okay. Great. Well, thank you. All right, so I'm going to start with some meeting logistics. We've already had some hurdles, and hopefully, let's see if I can advance the slide. Uh-oh. That's odd. Hold on. So I wonder if it's here. No. Our PowerPoint seems to be frozen. Well, this is a great example of everything that can go wrong, huh? Let me try this. No.
Where did you put the little ball? Is it down here?
It's on my screen because
Do you want to unplug it and replug it?
let me go ahead, and what I can do is I'm going to do this. I'm going to take control on this computer here and share that, and then do this, and then change this. Okay. There we go. Excellent. No challenge we can't figure out here today. Okay. So first of all, just letting you know that the meeting is being recorded, and we will send an email out at the end and give people a link to where they can find the recording, as well as we'll give a copy of the PowerPoint slides as well. So one of the things that we wanted to all practice here at the beginning is how to raise your hand, because we are going to be using the hand raising in order to take questions. So those of you who maybe don't use Zoom on a regular basis, for most computers, and it differs a little bit depending on what platform you're using, but for most computers, down in the bottom bar, if you hover over, there's a participants list. And if you click on the participants list there, you should see a list of names. And at the bottom of that, you should be able to raise your hand. So I'm going to give everyone an opportunity to try to raise their hand. So if everyone can see if they can figure that out, and we can figure out who that's working for and who it's not. I see a few hand raises. Excellent. And it's a little different depending on if you're using a Mac, etc. Excellent. I'm seeing lots of hands raised. Good. Good, good, good. Okay. Yes, and folks on the phone can't raise their hands, and so what I'm going to do for when we get into the questions and answers is I'm just going to go down through each of the phone participants and see if they have a question. Okay, it looks like the majority of people are able to raise their hand. Has anyone having trouble finding it? And if so, you can unmute yourself and we can try to help. Okay. Okay, and then those of you who have your hands raised, put your hands down, please. Like Simon says. Thanks. Great. It looks like everyone, we have all our hands down. Looks like Faith, you still have your hand up. There we go. Perfect. And Cecile, you can put your hand down. Okay, great. Perfect. Okay, and so I always like to learn the audience a little bit and know who we're talking to. So those of you who are currently a permittee, so you have a permit from us at the Water Board, how about putting your hand up? Great, and so many of you are currently permittees. Excellent, thanks. And if you want to go ahead and put your hands down. Perfect. And then those of you who are maybe a consultant and work for some of our permittees, you can raise your hand. Great, we've got a few of those. Okay, you can put those hands down. And then how about any others? Okay, it looks like most folks are either permittees or folks that work for permittees. Thanks. And then how about folks that did participate in our meeting on February 12th? So we had a kickoff meeting to share that we were working on this project and to give a bit of background and information. If you can put your hand up if you participated in that meeting here, either listened in or came here in San Luis Obispo on February 12th, you can put your hand up. Okay, so it looks like we have a lot of new folks that didn't participate on February 12th. Well, welcome to this. And because we have a lot of folks that didn't participate in that, the other thing that maybe I will do as well as, I'm going to make a note, when we send out the information on this meeting, we will also resend a link to the PowerPoint presentation for that meeting, because we did spend a bit of time explaining why we're doing this project and some of the rationale behind it. So I will add that to the list. Okay, and then as far as participants on the phone, I just want to make sure that you guys have the ability to answer questions. And so when we get to the Q&A, I'll go through, we have a couple of just phone numbers here, and I'll make sure that we give the opportunity for you to ask questions as well. Okay. And let me try going to the next slide. It's really odd that it doesn't want to respond. Let's try this. There we go, slide 3. Okay, so the project schedule, we've been working on this project since last fall, and when we started the project, what we initially did was a big data collection effort. So we have approximately 44 facilities in the Central Coast region that currently have individual permits that have flows greater than 100,000 gallons a day and that treat domestic wastewater and dispose of that to land. So we collected all the data that we had from all of your monitoring reports from 2004 to 2019 and compiled that so that we could see where everyone was at with their facilities and be able to compare facility to facility. We finished that effort in December. We did some internal work on a project charter, and then we sent a notice out to the existing permittees in December, letting you all know that we're working on this draft permit. And then at our January board meeting, we introduced it to our board and invited our permittees to participate in that. And then we had a public scoping meeting on February 12th. And then here we are today, where we released the draft permit last Friday, and we are having several of these meetings during the public comment period, including the meeting today. And the public comments will be due on July 20th, and our intention today is to help provide information that will help you with your review. And then our plan is to bring this item to the September 25th board meeting for consideration to adopt it at our board. And so our meeting objectives today are to go over some of the general permit details with you. We're also going to talk to you a bit about the general monitoring and reporting program. Each facility will have their own customized monitoring and reporting program, but we put out a general one so that you can see the components of what that would likely look like. And then we're also going to discuss some of the potential changes that might result from the proposed general permit compared to your current individual permit. So I want to start by showing you all a bit about the permit, because it can be a little bit overwhelming. And it would really help if my mouse would work. So somehow when we rebooted there we go. Okay. So those of you who have taken a look at the permit, on the one hand, it can seem a bit daunting. If you look at the table of contents, it's a fairly large document. You know, the main document is 39 pages long. However, the real meat of the document, the stuff that you're going to be the most interested in, is going to start essentially on page 20. So all of the findings that happen before page 20, that's all the background information, it's all the legal language, it's all the why we're doing what we're doing, but there's nothing in there that is you shall do this, you shall do that. That all starts essentially on page 20. So the real crux of the permit, the areas that you want to focus on your review, would be page 20 to page 38. In addition, there are some attachments, and there's some definitions and a bit of information about how folks will apply, but really the important attachment that we're going to talk about today is this attachment D. So this is this general monitoring reporting program that then would be tailored for each facility. And then the last attachment, attachment E, is the standard provisions that are already part of all of your individual permits, and we make them part of all of our permits. So that is the general areas to focus on. Go back to my slides here. And go back to presentation mode. There we go. And switch my display settings. Okay. Great. And with that, I will turn it over to Kelsey for the next part of the presentation. No? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm supposed to turn over to Howard. Howard is up next. Thank you, Howard. And I will unmute myself.
Hello, this is Howard Kolb. I introduced myself a few minutes ago. I am a staff engineer. I work for Jennifer. I helped draft the order. If anybody can't hear me, please go ahead and raise your hand, and we'll adjust my volume or whatever we need to do. Thank you, Jennifer. We're asking that everybody hold their questions till the end of the presentation, just to facilitate moving through the presentation, and we'll have ample time to answer any questions. If you look in the bottom corner, unfortunately on my particular screen, they're cut off, but there's some numbers on the bottoms of the pages. I don't know if that's cut off for everybody, but if you can see those numbers, you can take those numbers down for the slide number, and then we can go back to that during the question and answer. So we're going to start off with some of the big pieces of the order, and we'll just walk through about 8 or 9 of them. The first one is flow limits. The State Water Resources Control Board currently has a general order for systems that are 100,000 gallons a day or less. That's State Water Board Order 2016-0153. If anybody wants to see that order, you can go to the State Board page, look at their adopted orders, and find that order. If you can't find it, you can go ahead and contact us, and we will help you see that order. The order that you're looking at today was crafted very similarly to that order, but it's for facilities bigger than 100,000 gallons per day. Otherwise, we have to write individual permits for all those facilities, which is what you have at the moment. The next big piece of the puzzle, or of the permit, are the effluent limitations. And because it's a general order, it contains effluent limitations for ponds, trickling filters, sequencing batch reactors, activated sludge, etc. All of those are laid out in the permit. Depending on the type of wastewater system that you're going to ask us to enroll in the general order or general permit, we will tailor your monitoring program and your permit and say, okay, these are your requirements. So not all the requirements are implemented for every facility. We're going to show some tables here shortly. I just want to go through a few definitions. These are defined in the order, but just in case you don't have the order open. Milligrams, or mg, denotes milligrams per liter. L denotes liters. ml is milliliters. A small u and a g is micrograms, and then mpn is most probable number, and that's for bacteria. Next slide, please, Jennifer. So I just gave you those definitions. You can see the units. This is an example of what you will see in the permit, and this is for secondary treatment effluent limitations for activated sludge. These numbers should look very similar to everybody who has one of those systems. These are not new values. They come from US EPA or our basin plan or another document that has previously been published. Next slide, please. The other unique component of this order is we have the option for the facilities, the dischargers, to decide to use the median water quality objectives as effluent limits. And if you choose to do that, you will not be required to do groundwater monitoring if you meet those water quality objectives in your effluent. I don't want to get into the details of that right at the moment. Kelsey will be going over that in the monitoring section, so we'll go over the groundwater monitoring. Next slide, please. We also have requirements for land application, which is a loading requirement. This is something that we've had in a lot of our other orders. We are now putting it in the general order. There's not a lot to say about it other than we don't want you to overload your field so that there's odor kinds of issues. We also have a water recycling component in this. So if you want to be a producer of non-potable water, you can use this general order and create non-potable water. If you want to be a user of non-potable water, you will have to enroll in a separate permit, and that's another state permit. It's 2016-0068. It's from the Division of Drinking Water permit, and that as well can be found on the state board website. We are going to give you a link at the end to our website, and then you can link up to state website through that if you want to, or we can provide you some additional information. Next slide, please. These are some of the effluent limitations that you'll see for water recycling in the permit: the total coliform, the turbidity, the chlorine residual. You also see this big thing that says other constituents for operational requirements. If you want to recycle water, you must draft a Title 22 report that has to be reviewed and approved by the Division of Drinking Water. The Division of Drinking Water will provide their conditional approval back to the water board. We take those conditions and we will incorporate them into your enrollment into the general order, and we will tailor your monitoring program to include any monitoring that DDW requires consistent with that Title 22 report. So the reason we leave it a little bit vague is because each facility will be doing something subtly different, and that will be identified by DDW when you submit your Title 22 report. Next slide, please. There are also pre-treatment requirements. We do have some facilities, for example, the city of Santa Maria is over 5 million gallons a day. They have a required pre-treatment program. We have smaller facilities that have implemented pre-treatment programs, and they are written into their individual permits. This will allow the option, or if we identify a need for a particular facility to have a pre-treatment program, we can incorporate that into the permit. There are also some new data reporting requirements through GeoTracker. That's a state board system that other programs in the office have been using for the better part of 8 or 10 years. you'll be able to upload, or your lab will be able to upload data directly into that, and then you will upload your reports into that. That's a public database. You will be able to see the information. It's displayed graphically. Kelsey will talk about it a little bit, and there's quite a bit in the actual order on how to set all that up. We do have some support from Sacramento should you need that. Next slide, please. And then we also have some additional reports and plans that we would like people to begin to think about and prepare. So you can see if you need to do a pre-treatment program, you'll have 24 months to prepare that. All facilities will have operation and maintenance manuals. We do have a climate change adaptation plan and some requirements for that. And then a salt and nutrient management plan if directed by the Central Coast Executive Officer. The salt and nutrient management plans have been around for a while, and there are some additional processes out there like the SGMA, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, and people have put together programs to address salts and nutrients through that Sustainable Groundwater Management Act group. So you can talk to us and tell us what you're doing about it and how you're involved, and you may or may not have to develop this plan. Next slide. Okay, at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Kelsey, and she will talk about the monitoring program. And again, if you have any questions, we'll take any and all questions at the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Howard. And hello, everyone. My name's Kelsey. So I will use the next few slides to provide an overview of the main components of the monitoring and reporting program. And just a few admin notes. From this point forward, I will refer to the monitoring and reporting program as the MRP. And the draft MRP is identified as attachment D, and it can be found at the same location as the draft general permit for public review and comment. And as Jennifer had mentioned, please note that the draft MRP is designed to be viewed as a template. So your wastewater system specific MRP will be tailored to your facility and is dependent upon treatment type, raw wastewater characteristics, and method of disposal. And the wastewater system specific MRP will be issued with the discharger's notice of applicability, or often referred to as your NOA. So now I'll walk through each of these bullet points. The draft MRP does include water supply monitoring requirements. So this is where the discharger is required to collect representative samples of the raw water supply and have that sample analyzed for constituents specified in the MRP. So something a little bit different is, in lieu of the required water supply sampling, the discharger may request Central Coast Water Board Executive Officer approval to submit a well identification number, and the reporting year's consumer confidence report are also referred to as your annual water quality report. And the intent of this is to hopefully lessen the burden on the dischargers, avoid duplicating efforts, and to provide Central Coast Water Board staff with the information they need. Land application area, percolation pond, and spreading basin monitoring requires the discharger to monitor land application disposal areas. So examples of the required monitoring includes calculating loading application rates, monitoring for saturated conditions, monitoring for nuisance odors, and more. The solids disposal monitoring is pretty straightforward. It requires the discharger to report on the handling and disposal of all solids generated at their facility. And lastly, the influent effluent monitoring requirements, which is one of the more robust sections of the MRP. It includes flow monitoring, influent and effluent constituent monitoring based off of the wastewater system type, effluent monitoring for select constituents based upon raw wastewater characteristics, and select constituents can include oil and grease, formaldehyde, zinc, and a few others. And then finally, effluent monitoring for non-potable recycled water producers. Next slide, please. Okay, so the next slide shows a table of flow monitoring requirements that are specified on page 3 of the MRP. So as you can see, the discharger is required to monitor and report daily flow, peak daily flow, and mean daily flow in gallons per day. And this information is to be provided within the monitoring report submittals, which we'll discuss later. Next slide, please. This next slide is an example of a subset of the influent and effluent monitoring requirements. So as mentioned earlier, the MRP includes influent and effluent constituent monitoring requirements based on the treatment technology used at your facility. So the MRP includes monitoring tables for pond systems, trickling filter systems, and a category identified as other wastewater systems. So again, the wastewater system specific MRP will only include monitoring requirements that are specific to your facility. And if you guys have any questions on this, please feel free to contact either Howard, Jennifer, or myself, and we could walk you through that. Next slide, please. So another large component that Howard had mentioned is the groundwater monitoring requirements found in the MRP. So in the MRP, the discharger is presented two options. Option one is no groundwater monitoring. If the discharger does choose this option, they must demonstrate that the quality of effluent discharge from the wastewater system meets effluent limitations specified in Table 7. Table 7 is a table that Howard went over, but it includes basin plan water quality objectives, MCLs, which are maximum contaminant levels for drinking water, and agriculture water quality goals. So if the discharger chooses to proceed with option one, they must evaluate and provide a comparison of their effluent to the adopted effluent limitations. And if the discharger is unable to comply with the adopted effluent limitations, then they may be required to complete or implement a groundwater monitoring program. So this brings us to option number two, which is the implementation of a groundwater monitoring program. So if the discharger elects to discharge in excess of effluent limitations specified in Table 7 of the general permit, the discharger must implement a groundwater monitoring program to demonstrate that the discharge is not degrading underlying groundwater quality. And that's the intent of the permit, is to protect water quality. So in Table 7, what was specified as your effluent limitations will now become your groundwater limitations. And please note, the groundwater monitoring reports, work plans, and related documents, they must be prepared and stamped by a California licensed civil engineer or a professional geologist. And lastly, reporting requirements. It includes a preparation and submission of technical reports. The technical reports may include technical reports that Howard had mentioned earlier slides, but also can include additional reports that are requested by staff. They're also required to submit quarterly and annual monitoring reports and non-compliance reporting. What's a little bit different, I think, in the general permit versus individual permits is this quarterly and annual monitoring reports. So please note that you still will have daily and monthly monitoring requirements, and those are specified throughout the MRP. It's just this information will then need to be compiled and summarized in your quarterly and annual reports. The reports are required to be submitted electronically to both our Central Coast Water Board email inbox and to the State Water Board GeoTracker database. So as Howard had mentioned earlier, the submission of data and reports to GeoTracker is a new requirement in our WDR program. Other programs at the Water Board have been using this historically. And what it does is allows data to become readily accessible and publicly available. Next slide, please. So here's a subset of Table 7. For the entire table, please refer to the general permit. But as mentioned on the previous slide, dischargers are required to demonstrate that the effluent leaving their wastewater system will not degrade underlying groundwater quality. So this is done through, as we had mentioned, the adoption of the effluent limitations specified in this table, or through the implementation of a groundwater monitoring program. So I wanted to take the time to briefly walk you through how to apply this table to your wastewater systems. So if your disposal area and treatment system overlies a designated groundwater basin, which will likely apply to most of you, you're required to comply with Basin Plan Table 3.6, which is shown in that column. If not, you're required to use the MCLs, which are the maximum contaminant levels for drinking water, and the agriculture water quality goals. A discharger may also request executive officer approval to use the water quality objectives found in this left column from an adjacent designated basin. So again, Table 7 acts as both effluent limitations and groundwater limitations. And then the general permit walks the discharger through how to use this table. But as always, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out and we're happy to assist you. Next slide, please. So this next slide shows a subset of the groundwater monitoring requirements found on page 14 of the MRP. The groundwater monitoring requirements include pretty typical requirements that you see in groundwater, including depth to groundwater, specific constituent monitoring, and then general groundwater parameter monitoring. For the entire list, please refer to the MRP. Next slide, please. So switching gears a little bit. So we have identified some potential benefits that may result from the adoption of the proposed general permit. So the enrollment of new and existing wastewater systems into the general permit will be much more efficient, which will provide staff more time to work with dischargers one-on-one, as well as provide us with the opportunity to spend more time in the fields. Another one is new dischargers will know the conditions of a general permit prior to design and application. All wastewater systems will be using the same general permit with similar conditions and limits, which will be huge. It allows operators the opportunity to communicate and troubleshoot with one another more effectively and with greater ease because you guys will have similar requirements. And lastly, wastewater systems will have individualized monitoring programs. Next slide, please. And so here's our contact information. Please do not hesitate to contact either Jennifer or myself with any questions that you may have. Thank you, and I will hand it back to Jennifer.
Thank you, Kelsey. And let's see, Cecile, can you give me a thumbs up or a wave if you can hear me okay? Is the volume all right? I can't hear you, Cecile. Oh, yes. Okay, so my volume's okay. Great, thanks. And we put Kelsey and my names on these slides because Howard's going to be out a bit for vacation, but feel free to reach out to Howard as well. So the next thing that I wanted to walk you through was the, let me switch here. Is some information on where to find the documents. There we go. Okay. So the notification that hopefully all of you got last week led you to this page, which is where we post our tentative orders. And you'll see that there is a public notice document, and that public notice document provides the email address that you can provide formal comments, and also provides information that tells you that the comment period ends on July 20th. And then you'll see here we have both the draft permit, which contains attachments A through C, and then attachment D and E are separate. The other thing that is useful if you did not get our email notification last week, we recommend that you sign up for our interested parties list, and the link to that will also be in the presentation as well. But this is, we have an automated email subscription form here for all of our interested parties list, and if you sign up and then select this one here on the top right, it's the interested parties list for the large domestic wastewater general order. And that's where we'll continue to send updates about the permit, about upcoming meetings, etc. I'm going to switch back to presentation. Okay, so those links that I just went over. And next meetings. So we're going to have several meetings during this public comment period. We're having the one today where we're really introducing the permit, trying to give you some details, whet your appetite a bit. I know many of you probably haven't had a chance to dive into the details yet, but hopefully this background information will help you do your review. We're going to have a meeting next week on June 30th, and we're going to essentially share with you any initial questions that we've received and also be available to answer questions. And then we've set up times once a week, the following 2 weeks as well, to essentially be available to answer your questions. And with these follow-up meetings later on in July, we can tailor that depending on the types of questions that we're getting. So if we're getting a lot of the same type of questions, we can certainly walk through portions of the permit, whatever is useful for us. If not, we can just be available during the Zoom call, and anyone that has questions, we can answer those. And then I want to talk a little bit about informal versus formal comments. So you will see in that public notice document how to submit formal comments, and those formal comments we will include with our staff report that we submit to our board. And so we'll list all those comments, we'll list a formal response to all those comments. And so if you want to make sure that a particular comment is captured that way, please follow those instructions. And then we'll also be having lots of good conversations with all of you. We'll be having these meetings, and these are more informal comments where you can, say, hey, I don't quite understand a portion of the permit. Can you guys add some clarification? Can you add some definitions? We definitely want to hear from you. We want to hear if there are portions of the permit that are confusing. We want to hear if there's portions of the permit you have concerns about. The whole purpose of this comment period is to potentially make the permit a better document. So we look forward to the dialogue with you over the next month on this.